center point, 5 ringgit bill, and other KK malls. This story took place in a shopping mall when I was a teenager and was still in high school. During this period of the early 2000s, things were different compared to how it is now. It was a time of rebellious youngsters and foreigners that roamed the malls looking for trouble, anything for a quick adrenaline fix. These kids would often prey on the people who they thought were weaker than them by robbing them and taking whatever they can. Watches, gold necklaces, even shoes. Yes, you heard me right. The most obvious would be money, and if they don't get what they ask for, then you are up for a beating. Growing up with these circumstances, I would take extra precautions to try and not get robbed by one of these youngsters. I would hide the money I had inside my socks and just put some inside my wallet so people wouldn't know I had more than what I would show if I come across trouble. I also had no car at the time, so I had to use the bus to get to anywhere I needed to go. And these bus stations were run by some of these hooligans. It's also a place where they target people to rob from. I was up early one weekend to go to the mall and hang out with a few friends. I did the usual by going on a bus and walked to the mall. When I reached the mall, it was quite empty, and by this time, I had met up with one of my mates and we started to walk around to look for a place to have breakfast. Then suddenly, a group of about 20 youngsters could be seen walking opposite us. And so me and my friend tried to dodge them by walking to the side to avoid contact. But they came straight at us, and when we passed them, one of the guys pulled my backpack and started to grab me by my t-shirt. He asked for all the money I had in my wallet, and without hesitation, I pulled it out of my bag and showed him the 5 ringgit bill that I had and explained that I only had that money to buy food and get on a bus back to my home. The guy was visibly pissed, and his buddy started interrogating me by asking if I had any valuables on me. I straight up lied and showed him what was inside my bag and said I got nothing to give him except that 5 ringgit bill. Without an ounce of mercy, he shoved me and took the 5 ringgit bill, and at that moment, a security guard came by past us and just kept walking on while stealing some glances at us. He knew what was going on, but was too scared himself of getting any repercussions from these guys. So there I was, standing in the middle of about 20 of these guys and was just ready to get my beating. But fortunately, one of the older guys told them to just move along and take what I had. And so they left after that. I started to look for my friend who was with me, and there I see him standing at the side as if he didn't know me. I was disappointed at first for him leaving me there alone, but I can't blame him as we were outnumbered and there was nothing much that he could do anyway. And if you are wondering, yes, we are still mates. I was glad that I had hidden my money in my sock and managed to have a fun weekend despite after what happened. Well, that was only one of the times that this has happened to me. Once when I was walking with another friend, a little kid was trying to sell me a cheap phone, and stupidly we followed him to an alley, and this kid suddenly pulls out a large scissor and asked for money. Me, as usual, had my money in my sock, but my friend wasn't so lucky. He didn't have lots of cash with him, but he had a gold chain around his neck, and the little kid demanded that my friend handed it over to him. He was reluctant, but looking at those scissors, he had no choice. It was worth a few hundred ringgit, and it was a gift from his parents. After the kid got what he wanted, he ran off, and we went straight to the police station and reported the incident. Instead of getting any help, we got laughed at by the officers there, saying why didn't we just beat the kid. But looking at those large scissors in that kid's hands just made us so terrified of getting stabbed and bleed to death in a dirty alley where we probably wouldn't get help. I've seen someone get stabbed in the ribs once and could see blood all over the floor of the mall and down an escalator where he tried to flee from his assailant. I've heard a friend told me that once He witnessed a boy got his skull crushed in from a hammer after he got into an argument over an arcade game. He was taunting the boy he was playing with, and the loser got so pissed that he went and called his elder brother, and the brother did the deed and fled to one of the nearby islands where cops don't go in. Those were scary times to live in, and yet I had the best memories during that period. I've had a friend who went home without shoes, shirt, and pants when he sent his girlfriend home. He was lucky he didn't get stabbed or had his bones broken, just had his pride scratched. I had a guy high on meth come up to me and point a Swiss Army knife at my back for just looking at him. He choked me and asked what was my problem with him. I told him that I was just looking at his piercing on his eyebrow, which I also had one myself, but this didn't satisfy him and he wanted to fight with me one-on-one. But he was more than twice my size and age, so when instincts kicked in, I told him that if we were to fight, win or lose, he was going to be embarrassed as I was just a small kid and he had a weapon. So no matter what the outcome, it wouldn't look good for him. And miraculously, it worked. He agreed with me and just walked off. So kids, please stay away from drugs, especially meth. Slapped and almost stabbed. Pop-in. When I was much younger, I used to go out and party almost every night. I couldn't stand staying at home, so being out in town felt good, especially with friends. We would go bar hopping, and one of the pubs that we frequented was called Pop-in. We would get wasted as the alcohol here is dirt cheap due to the island being duty-free. So imagine being teenagers and being wasted most of the time. Not a good combination, and bad things are bound to happen. I grew up on this island and I know many of the townsfolk here. It's a relatively safe place to be since it's just a small island. You could literally leave your car doors unlocked and no one would steal your car. Hence, there's nowhere to run, and the only way out of the island is either by flight, speedboat, or ro-ro ferry. So back to the story. I was out one night with my buddies as usual, having some drinks at a local pub. We were having a great time listening to the live band that was playing at the time. It was crowded inside and people were drinking and dancing. Me and my friends were too. For animosity's sake, let's call my friend Steve. See, Steve and I were close and I knew him since he was in high school. At the time, I was in my early 20s. We were good friends, and while we were in the pub, he suddenly called me to go outside and accompany him to go and see someone. Curiously, I followed him outside, and when I asked him, he just told me to back him up and that the guy we were gonna meet was apparently dating Steve's younger sister, and Steve didn't like that one bit since his sister was still in high school. So when he came, Steve warned him not to disturb his sister and stay away from her, which I thought was fair. Then, being the hero wannabe, I butted in and started telling him the same thing, and he wasn't taking it one bit from me and got really pissed instead. He said that I was going to regret opening my mouth and just walked off. We went back inside and I started calling friends, telling them that a fight was going to go down, as I knew that guy was going to call his friends as well. About 15 minutes passed and I got called out, and this guy had brought about 15 to 20 guys and they surrounded me and Steve. Then this guy's uncle pulled me aside and slapped me, saying that I was a dead man. I tried to fight back, but then he did something that really shook me up. He brandished an army knife from his back jeans, the kind that had those teeth-like texture at the back end of the blade, the kind that could literally be used to pull your guts inside out. Yeah, it was that kind of knife. I froze and didn't know what to do, as he was holding on to my t-shirt with one hand and had a knife on the other. Immediately I thought to myself, oh shit, I'm gonna get stabbed and probably killed tonight. So much was racing through my mind and I couldn't think. According to Steve, Most of these guys had weapons on them. One of them even broke beer bottles and was holding up the sharp broken glass, ready to hurt us. Then, out of nowhere, my brother-in-law came screaming, saying that he was a cop and that backup was coming if they didn't settle it there and then. My brother-in-law is a big guy and stands at almost 6 feet tall, so I knew that they believed that he was a cop and started to settle down. The guy that was dating Steve's sister still wasn't satisfied and wanted to fight me one-on-one. At first I denied him, but after he kept asking, I just said yes. Luckily, he didn't go through with it and just settled with a handshake. He told me not to go after his uncle and wanted to really settle. I agreed, since this was such a small island and you would meet the same people all the time. I went home after that as I had enough for the night, and that incident shook the alcohol out of me and sobered me up. I still saw that guy and his knife-wielding uncle a couple more times when I was out in town, but we just nodded to each other and never had problems with one another ever since. So that's my story of the time I almost got stabbed and probably killed by some random guy's uncle, just for butting in their conversation, which was none of my business in the first place. And that's the reason why I no longer favor going out to drink till you can't think straight. It's better to stick to the herbs instead and just chill at home. The Beverly Incident, Myuu Village. I grew up in an apartment complex, and there was a village situated next to it called Myuu Village. You see, this village is quite huge and many locals and foreigners live there. I am not insinuating that all of the residents living there are hooligans, but there were a few bunch that were the rotten apples. There were many shop lots within the apartment complex, such as restaurants, cyber cafes, supermarkets, and a gaming center. This is where this incident took place. Me and my buddies were just hanging out around the area, as it was the end of the year and it was school holiday season. If I remember correctly, there was about 8 of us, all at the ages of 15 to 16, and we were all inside the arcade center and hitting up Tekken and other games of such, when this kid of about 12 years old asked from one of us for token coins to heat up the arcade. This kid was from the Myuu Village, and my buddies wasn't too fond of kids from that area, so being the dumb kids that we were, they refused to give him the tokens and instead threatened to kick his ass if he doesn't leave us alone. The kid just backed off and disappeared out of sight. We assumed he just went home to ponder upon his failed attempt at getting free tokens, but we didn't realize how much of a mistake that was. About half an hour passed and we moved to the cyber cafe close to the arcade and wanted to continue our gaming there. But it had a full house, so we had to wait for our turn and just chilled outside. This was on the first floor of the commercial building, so we were overlooking the road across the supermarket below. After just over 10 minutes of waiting for our turn, suddenly we saw a group of about 30 guys or more walking towards the cyber cafe below us. From the way they were walking in a pack and all puffed up, I could tell it was trouble. Then, when one of the guys from the pack saw us, he pointed and shouted for us to stay where we were. We could see them holding baseball bats and metal chains. They ran up the stairs and immediately started throwing punches. I took one to the jaw. My buddies also had the same. One of my buddy was hit with a metal chain and it almost broke his arm. We scattered all over the place trying to find cover and get away from these guys, as we had no weapons on us and we were outnumbered badly. Me and 2 of my buddies hid inside the cafe's toilet and locked ourselves in there for about 20 minutes. While inside, we could hear the guy with the chain hitting the floor with it, daring us to come out, but we stayed put until the worker there told us they left the CC. When all of us finally met up, we told each other of our experiences. One friend got kicked in the chest so hard he flew onto the hood of a car. Those hooligans only left after folks from the shops started to come out and see what was going on. The security there did nothing to help us, and being the rebel kids, we didn't call the cops and just went back to my place. I can now think back and laugh about this incident with my buddies, but I also know that it could have gone very wrong and one of us could have ended up in the hospital. All of this over game tokens. The meth addict, Akong. Let's not meet. Back in 2004, when I was living at a Phase 3 apartment building, I used to go to Phase 1 and look at the resident kids there play basketball. Mind you, I was 17 years of age at the time, so I was really naive and dumb. Plus, my parents were not living with me at the time, so I was living alone. There was a guy I met who was much older than me at this basketball court. I think he was in his mid-30s at the time, and I thought that it was cool to be hanging out with the elder guys as they knew so much more than me. We called him Akong, but little did I know that the things he would teach me were not good examples nor fun. At first, he said that he would hook me up with pretty girls down at the local pubs with a little cash, if you know what I mean. He found out that I had a couple hundred ringgit in cash stored in my room. And yes, I was the one who told him one night when we were drunk at my place. And with that said, he took all my savings and told me to wait for the girl to get ready while he went inside of the pub with her. I was foolish and naive at the time, but I was observant and very aware of my situations. I noticed that the girl he was talking to never even looked at me or took a single glance, just took his money and went inside with him. He came out of the pub a couple of minutes later and we waited in the car. Fast forward to a couple of hours later and he went back inside and came back out immediately. He told me that we had to go as she wasn't going to come out tonight. He said that she would meet me the next day, and as you can imagine, I wasn't happy at all, so we went back to my place and just chilled there. That night, I noticed him going in and out of the balcony where I used to dry my clothes and could smell something foul coming from there. When I opened the door, I saw him sitting in a squatting position, holding a piece of foil to his face and burning some sort of white substance. At first glance, I thought he was trying to cook something for us to eat, but then he turned to me with red eyes and asked if I wanted some. I looked at him perplexed and asked him what the hell he was burning that smelled so bad. Then like a light bulb just switched on all of a sudden, I realized that he was smoking meth, or as we call it here locally, batu or shabu. Then I just said, "No thanks, I'm good, you go ahead," and just closed the door. By this time, I knew that he had used all my savings to buy this stinky drug, and I knew that he was a dangerous guy. You see, one of the reasons why I hanged out with him was because he taught me all sorts of martial arts and ways to defend myself. He even claimed to have fought several people at once, so I thought that he was cool and I could learn a thing or two regarding self-defense. Turns out that he was out of his mind from smoking so much meth and being so convincing. I believed him. But after finding out this little secret of his, I had a plan to get even and done with this trickster. The next day, we went back to the same pub and the same woman appeared and the routine repeated itself. We waited for a couple hours and then left when he said that the girl couldn't see me that night. Immediately from the pub, I sent him home and I went to go and see my schoolmates. I explained to them regarding what happened and they came up with a plan. Plan was simple. I were to tell Akong that the money I passed to him was not mine and that it was money I loaned from loan sharks. And so the plan was executed the next night. I told Akong the loan shark version of my story and he looked a little shaky after that. I said that we had to go and see these guys and explain to them that we will pay back the money that he used. So we got in my car and left to a secluded area at a rural commercial center. When we got out of the car, a few of my schoolmates opened my car door and pretended to drag me to a corner where Akong couldn't see me. They started kicking and banging the shop lot sliding doors as if they were hitting me. Then they dragged me back to where Akong was and asked him to pay up the money owed. He didn't say a word and got the ass kicking of a lifetime. It lasted for about 5 minutes tops, but looking at them pummel him till I saw blood was oddly satisfying to say the least. He didn't fight back, and after they were done, I pulled him into my car and we drove off. I dropped him off at his place and he stumbled out while cursing some words which I couldn't hear. And that was the last time I ever saw him. It would be weeks before I ever saw him again at a coffee shop. I have moved to an island about 150 kilometers away from that place, and it has been about 17 years since that incident. Maybe what I did was wrong, maybe not. Either way, I have no regrets or remorse for him, and I am glad I never took up on his offer to smoke meth. So to you, Mr. Akong, please, let's never meet again.